A political storm in Europe. Viktor Orbán is on the brink of political collapse. Total isolation within the EU. What emerged forced Europe to take a hard line. Trust in Budapest is dropping to zero. Unexpectedly, Orbán was one step from death. A stunning assassination plot on Putin's friend. Moscow had planned every single detail, and suddenly a blow that could be fatal. Ursula is effectively bypassing Budapest's veto. Ukraine will receive billions. Europe is ready to go even further, stripping Hungary of its right to vote. So what is actually happening? And who is pulling the strings? Is Orbán's political end really near? All this in a moment, don't miss it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Solomia Dolik with the latest events. Shock. Has Europe lost its trust? A major scandal over Hungary erupted in the EU. The EU is effectively barring Hungary from sensitive and closed-door negotiations. And these aren't just rumors, but a grim reality reported by Politico. According to the outlet, Brussels is limiting sensitive data to Budapest due to serious fears of leaks to Moscow. What does this mean? European leaders are increasingly avoiding full 27-state summits, moving to smaller clubs of trust. The reason is fear. Fear that strategic decisions could end up in the hands of the aggressor state. One European official stated plainly, disloyal states are forcing the EU to change the rules. And that's not all. Previously, the Washington Post reported that Hungary's Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó allegedly briefed Sergei Lavrov on EU Council meetings. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk confirmed that Europe has long had such suspicions. And now the main question, what's next? Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is facing unprecedented pressure. He's criticized in Europe, in conflict with Ukraine, and at home the political opposition is growing. Next, even more shocking details that overturn our view of European politics. Following news of lost trust in Hungary within the EU, a new bombshell. According to the Washington Post, Russian intelligence considered a staged assassination plot against Viktor Orbán. Operation Game Changer involved a radical step, creating a fake crisis to completely shift Hungary's election campaign. The documents state the goal: move the election from a rational to an emotional level. Fear, security, and national defense. These were the themes they planned to exploit. The plan was for Orbán to appear not just as a politician, but as the nation's sole protector. And here a key question arises: is this why Budapest's rhetoric has been becoming increasingly aggressive lately? And were they not preparing the ground for even more high-profile events? According to journalists, this scenario was inspired by events in the United States in 2024, when support for Donald Trump surged after the assassination attempt. The Kremlin, it seems, has decided. This could work in Europe as well. But so far, it hasn't reached such extremes. Instead, Russia has focused on information warfare. This involves supporting Orbán's media campaign, which is built on anti-Ukrainian narratives and fears for sovereignty. According to European intelligence services, Russian diplomats in Budapest may be involved coordinating work with loyal journalists. Moreover, there are reports of Russian military intelligence presence in Hungary and attempts to influence even election results in case of an opposition victory. And here the picture becomes even more alarming. Orbán is not just a politician. According to Western officials, he is a strategically important asset for Moscow. It is through him that for years Russia has gained access to the internal discussions of the European Union. In fact, as European security officers state, Moscow was sitting at the EU negotiating table, and now the puzzle is coming together. Pressure from Europe, tension with Ukraine, internal opposition, and simultaneously likely Kremlin attempts to interfere in Hungary's political future at any cost. And against this backdrop, a resolution that breaks plans and puts an end to the blackmail. After trust scandals, suspicions of ties to Moscow, and even shocking reports of a possible special operation, Viktor Orbán receives a powerful blow from Europe. His strategy of blocking has failed. Ukraine will indeed receive 90 billion euros from the European Union, despite the open veto from Budapest. This was clearly stated by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen after the EU Leaders Summit in Brussels. Her words sound like a political verdict.
The loan remains blocked because one leader is not keeping his word. But let me repeat what I have already said in Kyiv. We will get this done one way or another.
In effect, this is a signal. Europe will no longer allow itself to be blackmailed. This refers to a large-scale support package for Ukraine for 2026 to 2028. The decision was made back in December 2025, and as von der Leyen emphasized, all conditions have already been met.
There was one condition. The condition that 3 countries, Hungary, Slovakia, and Czechia, would not participate in the loan. This condition has been met. So let us clearly define our position.
Meaning that even without Hungary, Slovakia, and Czechia, the mechanism works. And this is already about more than just finances.
This is a demonstration of unity. Against this backdrop, an open revolt against Orbán is effectively brewing within the European Union itself. His actions are increasingly being called not just political bargaining, but a betrayal of European principles. For the first time, European leaders are seriously discussing an unprecedented step, stripping Hungary of its voting rights in the EU. An explosion in the heart of Budapest. The level of tension has jumped sharply. Orbán has gone after Zelensky. A blow to Ukraine in an attempt to stay in power. The friend of Moscow is putting everything on the table, hoping to gain some trump cards. Instead, Kyiv struck Orbán from an unexpected side. A new scandal flared up in an instant. Hungarians themselves are asking Putin to take the prime minister to Moscow. You will be shocked by all of this coming up. Dirty games. The Hungarian prime minister's election campaign knows no bounds. Orbán's election advertising has caused a scandal. Photos of banners allegedly depicting Volodymyr Zelensky began to circulate online with the claim, "Remember, Uzhhorod is a Hungarian city, borscht is a Hungarian dish."
This is a traditional scheme of an external threat, around which one needs to unite around a national leader to confront it. And, well, it's obvious that this is related to the fact that Orbán has quite serious ties with Russia. Szijjártó never leaves Moscow. The Russians are helping to build a nuclear power plant. Well, that is, effectively, Orbán is Russia's main agent of influence in the European Union. So that's why he also probably displayed a corresponding role that specifically Zelensky and Ukraine were chosen as the main targets for attacks during the election period.
The Hungarian government has officially denied the existence of such posters, Russian media report. Although Viktor Orbán actively uses the image of Volodymyr Zelensky in his election campaigning. Billboards have been put up in cities across the country showing the Ukrainian leader with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Hungarian opposition leader Peter Magyar.
Orbán and his political consultants are intentionally linking Magyar with Zelensky, with Ukraine, trying to influence their voting again, formulating their far-right, such an isolationist position, saying that everything connected with Zelensky is bad, and therefore Magyar is bad too. That's why he says that, either we will form the government, meaning him and his party, if they win the election, or Zelensky will. Well, it's such a bogeyman, a Baba Yaga.
Orbán is conducting an aggressive media campaign that is full of disinformation. The main focus is to convince Hungarians not to support the rest of Europe in helping Ukraine. He also stated that the elections could be the last before a possible war if his party does not win.
Hungarian society is very saturated with Orbán's propaganda. All TV channels, all mass media in Hungary are under Orbán's complete and total control, with no exceptions. And so indeed, when he tries to form what appears to be a seemingly sovereign and independent internal political position, and then finds or identifies an external enemy to focus on.
Earlier, the Hungarian Prime Minister blocked a loan of 90 billion euros for Ukraine, accusing Kyiv of deliberately blocking oil transit from Russia via the Druzhba pipeline, damaged by Russian attacks. On March 17th, it became known that Europe offered technical support for restoration. Repairs could take about a month and a half, and such a decision could be a step toward unblocking financial aid and loans for Ukraine.
I think that the European Union also really does not want this Druzhba topic to be used in Orbán's election campaign. To be honest, I actually do not think it will help much, because in any case, the nature of the election campaign won't change at all because of it. Well, they think that they shouldn't give Orbán trumps, like someone is trying to crush him economically and so on. I personally don't think this is the right approach, but the European Union decided to act in this manner.
Voting in Hungary is set for April 12th, and it's called the most serious challenge to Orbán's power. His Fidesz party is losing to the opposition TISA.
Orbán could lose power. All the polls indicate this. Actually, besides the polls, I think it's enough to look at the recent rallies for and against Orbán that took place in Budapest to make it clear that, well, to put it mildly, opposition sentiments are popular in Hungary. Naturally, Orbán will resist this, and resist by far not only through legal methods. He has previously engaged in manipulating the gerrymandering of districts. I think this time too, everything will be in order with the falsifications. And it's absolutely possible that the elections will be rigged by Orbán. And after that, I don't know, maybe there will be some protests. So in fact, Orbán is really holding on to power with all his might.
The era of Orbán, who has been in power for 16 years, is under threat, so he is doing everything possible to stay afloat. At this moment, Orbán is barely standing on his feet. Protests have engulfed Budapest. The situation is escalating. Thousands of Hungarians can't be stopped. In agony, Orbán turned on Ukraine, a secret Kremlin plot. Zelensky couldn't take it and slammed Putin's friend in front of everyone. New details of this political explosion shock even the most resilient. What has surfaced could seriously hit the Prime Minister. Election disruption. Will they manage to put Orbán in his place and kick Moscow out of Budapest? Let's watch. A show of force. Large-scale rallies of supporters took place in Budapest for Prime Minister Viktor Orbán.
Hey, friends. Victor. And meanwhile...
And his main opponent, Peter Magyar, During his speech, Viktor Orbán called on his supporters to actively participate in the vote, which he described as historic. According to him, the ruling Fidesz party must exceed the result obtained in the 2022 elections.
Most likely, what this will mean for him is the very real possibility of being held accountable, especially if he ends up losing these elections. Because, well, yes, of course, in any case, even if the Fidesz party does lose the elections, it will simply move into the opposition. But then, at that point, Magyar's hands will be completely untied regarding the investigation of Orbán's corruption schemes, primarily those related to the Russian Federation and the transit of Russian energy resources. I think that such investigations will, of course, be supported in Brussels and other European Union countries.
At the same time, Orbán is again using the theme of the war in Ukraine for his own political campaign, stating that Hungarian citizens will not die for someone else's war and will live in their own country. He accused Ukraine of interfering in the election campaign, claiming that Kyiv supports the opposition and the European Union, allegedly in an attempt to remove him from office. The Prime Minister also stated that the people must choose who will form the government of Hungary, him or Zelensky.
Orbán frames the main evil as on one hand the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and on the other the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. If you even look at all the campaigning that Orbán is doing inside Hungary now, the whole country is covered with posters of Zelensky, together with Magyar. Moreover, these two politicians, I don't know, well, maybe they saw each other once in their lives, yes, when Magyar came to Kyiv. Well, that's the maximum. That is, Orbán and his political strategists are deliberately linking Magyar with Zelensky, with Ukraine.
Orbán is conducting an aggressive media campaign that is full of disinformation. The main focus is to convince Hungarians not to support the rest of Europe in helping Ukraine, because in his opinion this will lead the country to a financial crisis.
Hungarian society is heavily saturated with Orbán's propaganda. All TV channels and all mass media outlets in Hungary are under the complete control of Orbán. And so, indeed, when he tries to form what seems like a sovereign internal position and policy and finds an external enemy.
Earlier, the Hungarian Prime Minister blocked a €90 billion loan for Ukraine, accusing Kyiv of deliberately blocking oil transit from the Russian Federation through the Druzhba pipeline, which was damaged by Russian attacks. A Hungarian delegation also arrived in Kyiv, supposedly for negotiations regarding the oil pipeline, but they did not coordinate any official meetings with the Ukrainian authorities.
Well, you can't call all of this anything other than a provocation. Moreover, I think that in reality, this is only a piece of the puzzle, the visible part, the continuation of which we will see very soon. Because, let's say, the stabilization of the rating of Orbán's political party and Orbán himself is now being handled not just by Hungarian political consultants, but after the visit of Szijjártó, the Hungarian foreign minister, to Moscow, a group of Moscow political consultants arrived who will most likely develop a more aggressive strategy, including through social networks, Telegram and TikTok.
The vote in Hungary is scheduled for April 12th, and it is being called the most serious challenge to Orbán's power since he took over the government in 2010. The TISA party is now ahead of the Fidesz party led by Orbán in most polls.
Well, this is certainly a good chance for Ukraine and for Hungary. And in principle, for both Hungary and the European Union, it's also a good chance to, well, stabilize relations. And of course, if anyone thinks that if Magyar wins tomorrow, Ukraine and Hungary will become best friends, no. Well, of course not, because society is pumped up with negativity towards Ukraine and towards the European Union.
The growth in support for TISA is primarily due to the fact that it managed to form a broad coalition of dissatisfied voters. Also, a significant role for Magyar is played by the fatigue of a part of society from 2 decades of Orbán's dominance in Hungarian politics. Against this background, the demand for political change is growing.
Urgent. Orbán's cheap trick didn't work. Kiev didn't become a hostage of the Moscow regime, but struck back so hard that even the Kremlin felt it. Putin's friend was left speechless by this. Zelensky has brought Moscow's ally to his knees. Europe has given a decisive order. The elections in Hungary are a failure. Orbán is being swept away a month before the vote. Putin is tearing his hair out in his bunker. Ukraine has managed to make Hungary turn against the Russian Federation. Shocking. More on this next.
Hungary continues to pressure Ukraine and is once again making claims. This time, Hungary reacted to Russia's claims of an alleged Ukrainian attack on a compressor station linked to TurkStream, and called it an attack against Hungary's sovereignty. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó stated that TurkStream guarantees gas supplies to Hungary, and without it, the country's gas supply would be simply impossible.
Ukraine has now attacked the TurkStream infrastructure in Russia, which ensures gas supplies to Hungary. Without TurkStream, Hungary simply won't be able to safely receive gas from a geographical and physical standpoint. Ukraine's blocking of transit through the Druzhba pipeline and this strike on TurkStream are serious attacks against our sovereignty.
However, Szijjártó did not specify where or when this infrastructure was attacked. The claim that Ukraine allegedly wants to attack TurkStream has been repeatedly stated by the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin himself.
We are talking about a possible explosion of our gas systems along the bottom of the Black Sea. This is the so-called TurkStream and Blue Stream. They just can't seem to settle down. They don't know what to do to destroy this peace process with an attempt at a settlement through diplomatic means. They are doing everything they can to carry out some kind of provocation.
And all this is happening against the backdrop of the upcoming elections in Hungary, scheduled for April 12th.
In these elections, Orbán has bet everything on the theme of foreign policy, and in particular on the theme of demonizing Ukraine. Why did he do this? Because he has nothing to boast about in terms of domestic policy. A huge level of corruption, constant corruption and other scandals involving him and members of his party, deteriorating relations with Europe, well, and with Hungary's neighbors in general. All of this is hardly a result that can be presented to the voter to secure re-election.
Just recently, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán claimed that the Ukrainian authorities are allegedly actively interfering in the Hungarian elections. According to him, the Ukrainian side cares about the outcome of the elections in Hungary and therefore decided to participate in the election campaign. According to the Hungarian Prime Minister, active participants in these elections will be not only opposition Hungarian politicians, but also the Ukrainian authorities and the President of Ukraine.
We stand on the ground of common sense, so this should not surprise us. The President of Ukraine and Ukraine will be active participants in these elections, and we must defeat them as well. We know that they differentiate our opponents. We know how it happens.
In other words, they are constantly demonizing Ukraine as part of the election campaign. Most likely with the involvement of Russian political consultants, as well as specialists from the Russian GRU, Orbán has bet on a foreign policy of demonizing Ukraine and demonizing Europe. He has done this before, only previously his main enemies were, for example, Soros. Now, instead of Soros, it is Ukraine and
However, against the backdrop of all these provocations, statements, and actions by Hungary, Orbán's Kremlin strategists miscalculated the cards Ukraine actually holds. Ukraine's financial resources turned out to be less depleted than politicians had feared. And the country can hold out at least until the beginning of May. 4 sources familiar with Kyiv's finances told Politico about this. Previously, there were fears that the Ukrainian authorities, facing a budget deficit of at least $50 billion this year, would start running out of funds as early as the end of March. However, the situation changed after the International Monetary Fund approved an $8.1 billion loan for Ukraine last month. Of this amount, $1.5 billion was paid out immediately. In mid-December, European Union leaders agreed on a €90 billion financial support package for Ukraine to help fund its defense against Russian troops. However, Hungary recently blocked this initiative, accusing Ukraine of deliberately delaying repairs to the damaged oil pipeline, Druzhba for political reasons, in order to influence the elections that could remove the current Prime Minister Viktor Orbán from power. Kyiv rejected these allegations, stating that the pipeline was too damaged to transport vital supplies of Russian oil to Hungary following a drone attack in late January. Most likely, Orbán's Kremlin strategists expected that if the first $90 billion loan tranche did not arrive by early April, the Ukrainian government would have to cut spending due to the deficit. Such a situation would mean that Kyiv would be interested in finding ways to unblock the pipeline in order to unblock the loan. And that would mean an attempt to negotiate with Orbán, who would thus win the political war he himself declared. Indeed, the Hungarian Prime Minister himself was counting on Kyiv running out of resources just before the elections in Hungary. Now, if the repairs to Druzhba do not take place by April 12th, Orbán has effectively lost. This could be a negative factor for the Hungarian Prime Minister's ratings, as the voter will not get the promised victory over Ukraine. As of today, the Hungarian opposition party TISA maintains its lead ahead of the elections.
Finally, an opposition leader has emerged in Hungary, the leader of the opposition forces, Peter Magyar. Orbán has been trying his best to demonize him, but so far it hasn't been working very well.
As Reuters reports, a month before the elections in Hungary, Peter Magyar's TISA is ahead of Fidesz, the party of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, by 14 percentage points among decided voters. In January, the gap was 16 points. TISA received the support of 53% of decided voters. The figure has not changed since January, while Fidesz was supported by 39%.
One way or another, there will be many questions for him in the future regarding his activities, corruption, and ties to Russia. What did he get for effectively trading the status of a leader of a European Union member state? So there will be many questions for him, and I hope that in a month Hungary will have a new government with which Ukraine can, in some way or another, attempt to gradually build more adequate, more normal, and more stable relations over time.
And what do you think about these events? We are waiting for your comments. There will be more to come. Stay informed about the main things and don't forget to like. Peaceful skies above your head.